Welcome to the Orange County Forum, where newsmakers keep you informed about local, national, and global issues that impact Orange County today.
I want to thank you very much all for coming and investing time in a very, very important initiative. It is great to see so many familiar faces in the room, people who care, people who believe in Orange County. It's just marvelous. When Mike Ruane asked me a couple weeks ago if I would moderate today's panel, without hesitation, I said yes. I'm always honored and humbled to be in front of a group of people, and particularly an august group such as this. So many thought leaders in the room, so many people who care about the quality of life here. And I think today is another example of why the forum itself is such an essential part of our community, igniting the kind of dialogue and discourse that is so essential to improve the quality of life in this county that so many of us proudly call home. But as someone who cares passionately and genuinely about my home, I know there's another side to Orange County, a growing side to this community that troubles me, and I know many of you that are sitting here today. For all of the advantages and all of the blessings of being able to live and work in this community and region, there is a reality of a widening gap between the haves and the have-nots, the proverbial tale of two counties that threatens our very future. Once again, the annual Orange County Community Indicators Report lays out in 52 pages of stark detail the worsening plight of a growing portion of our local families. The report, one of the most important released every single year in Orange County, was covered on the front page of the Orange County Register in early August by one of our senior business writers, Margot Roosevelt, who is in the room today. As she wrote clearly, the report details vividly the disparity in housing, income, and education for lower income families who are trying to provide shelter, food, and a future in a community where the cost of living is 46% higher than the average in America. Max Gardner, CEO of the United Way of Orange County, eloquently echoed these challenges in an op-ed piece just this past Sunday, recommended reading for anyone who cares about these topics. If elected officials, and we have some in the room, Chris Murray and others today, community influencers, and you're all community influencers, and corporate chiefs and captains of business do not act soon, the issues of affordable housing for our present and future workforce, our children's health and well-being, and the so-called opportunity gap between high and low income families as it relates to education, employment, and standard of living threatens to slow and frankly even derail the promise and the reality of a healthy and balanced Orange County going forward in the 21st century. Today, we are very fortunate to have three highly respected and deeply knowledgeable thought leaders who will unpack these issues for us. From their unique perspective, the result of being in the trenches, on the street, and working firsthand with those most directly impacted, we will hopefully better define the problems and hopefully hear about solutions and strategies to begin to really heal and fix those gaps that trouble us. It is my pleasure now to ask these three experts who bring a passion and a wealth of experience to these topics to please join me on stage. I'm going to start with you, Mr. Puntel. I'm going to ask you, in this age that we live in, millennials moving into the workforce, a lot of shifting incomes, job losses, affordable housing, a very important topic. How critical is it to Orange County going forward? Give us a sense of the problem, the issue, and where we're going with this.
Thank you very much. It's an honor to be here again. Hello, everybody. Hope you're having a great lunch. It's very important.
I think it's one. It's 12:50. We got a ways to go, Steve. Can you work?
So I'm gonna walk you through a few pages in the report. Everybody have a copy of your report? So let's start with page 8, because I think this articulates well why this is such a critical conversation. The very first line on page 8, Orange County employers say it's become increasingly difficult to find workers with both the technical and soft skills to fill openings. That is, I think, the one of the most critical reasons why housing should be at the top of Orange County's list. Because why is that? A couple of reasons. One is, go to page 2, or why is it becoming increasingly difficult to find employees for Orange County companies? If you go to page 2, the chart in the lower left corner, the only population in Orange County that is growing is the senior population. Not that this room's reflective of that particular trend, but if you look at the younger population, especially the workforce age population, you're in pretty dramatic decline. And so you play that forward, and it's not a good thing. And so then if you go to page 26, which is the other reason why this is such a critical conversation, you can look at is the affordability quotient is a critical aspect of why employers can't find employees. If you take a look at the jobs that can't qualify for entry-level housing, and you understand the price pressures that are on housing and the trend that's moving, you can once again play that forward and understand that the ability to afford housing in Orange County is driving people out of Orange County. But it's not just about the employees that I think we should make, why I think we should make this important. Because if you go to page, let's go to 28, the one right after 26. And if you take a look, and you can just read the fact that 29, is that 39 or 29? Since I heard 29,300 children live in families that are either double or tripled up. I mean, how can we as a society accept that we are not meeting the needs? This isn't anything about growth. This isn't anything about, any other conversation that you may want to have other than we're not able to adequately house our own children. And to sum it up, if you go to page 6, and the heading on page 6, as our children go, so goes our county. And ultimately, I think it's a critical conversation that we have a huge challenge. And this is just not an Orange County problem. This is a Southern California problem. Southern California is estimated to be 600,000 housing units short for the population we have. The question is, can we solve this problem?
Thank you, Steve, very much. We'll come back to some solutions, and I know you're prepared to share those with us. Billy, I'd like to turn to you. What is the issue with education and access to it in this county on all the levels?
So let me again say thank you. I'm honored to be back and honored to be with an amazing panel. We had the pleasure and honor of having Secretary Julian Castro, who was the U.S. Department Secretary of Housing and Development from Washington, D.C. at commencement. And what he said was, you can't be pro-business unless you're pro-education. And I'm going to take that a step further. You can't be pro-housing or pro-health or pro-infrastructure or pro-economy unless you are pro-education. We all know in this room that if you have a good education, you're more likely to buy a house, more likely to be involved in your community, more likely not to use social services, more likely not to go to prison. And yet, as you look at this report and we look at it, there are some good news. High school is up, high school graduation's up. But when you disaggregate that data and look at that data, Latinos have a high percentage of dropout in the 9th grade. Think about that. And who is the largest ethnic group growing in Orange County? Like California, like this nation, are Latinos. So we need to look at and see what's happening in our high schools and think about how do we not have the haves and the have-nots. And then you look at those that actually graduate from high school and want to go to Cal State Fullerton, of course, or the UC or the other CSUs, and you see that only 50% have completed the requirements to enter as eligible students into Cal State Fullerton. And who are those students? Low-income students, students of color, mostly Latinos in Orange County. So if we're not paying attention to the haves and have-nots, who is the workforce? Who are the community leaders? Who's going to take over those businesses? Who's going to be the next university presidents? Who's going to be the next scientists? So that's the issue we need to really start to think about, that we do have the haves and have-nots. When you look at those counties and you see which counties have very, very high graduation rates and are eligible to walk into a UC, CSU, or other place, and look at those counties that have the 39% who are eligible graduates. And where are they? Anaheim, Santa Ana. We need to pay attention to that. We do have a county of haves and have-nots.
Thank you, Millie, very much. Christina, we all see it. This is the time of year when we are particularly thinking about children. School has just resumed, publics, privates. You see it on the road with school buses. You see it on the Facebook pages. Everybody's posting about their kids going back to school, what they're wearing, a lot of excitement around that. But we also know there is a segment of the population, children, this time of year isn't particularly memorable for that. They're struggling. So talk about the depth of that problem in that side of Orange County for us.
Thank you, and I wanted to share comments on the panelists today about how excited I am to be here. This is my debut on the panel, so very excited to be with such distinguished guests. And I think what I want to add on to what Billy just said about you can't be pro-housing and pro-economic, without being pro-education. And I would add to that, you can't be those things without being pro-children. Because we have to recognize that our children are going to grow up and become adults. And there's a couple of things I want to point to that I think are sort of startling statistics about what's happening here in Orange County. Echoing back to some of the comments that Steve made. First of all, our population is aging significantly, and the number of children in this county is declining, which means that every single one of those children is so vitally important because they are our future workforce, and they are going to be supporting our economy and hopefully supporting our growth in 10 and 15 years. So we have fewer of them, and they are a precious resource that we have to recognize in this county. I want to point to a couple of charts that I think hopefully sort of mark the criticalness of this issue, following on Steve's comments. So if we look at page 14, these are annual costs of chronic illness in Orange County. These are not national statistics. This is Orange County specific statistics in the billions. Now put back, and I want you to look at page 12. There's a chart there. 1/3 of Orange County children are obese. What are the factors that are driving chronic illness? Obesity is a major significant one. So if we think about, are we generating a healthy children that are going to become healthy adults? I think we're at risk. One of the things that you'll see in the health section of the report, it talks about the fact that deaths due to chronic illness are declining, which is good news, which is very good news. But that doesn't mean that less people are suffering from chronic illness. It means that more people are living longer with chronic illness. How do we make a difference in that? It's from early intervention and prevention. And we need to be raising the next generation of children to be extremely healthy. And by investing in early intervention services, we can make a difference. We can raise the next generation to be healthier. So we're not investing billions in health treatment costs. We're not investing billions in the treatment of diabetes or heart disease. We're investing in the economic programs that we know will be the future for this economy.
Thank you very much, Christina. Welcome. Steve, I'm going to come back to you. I'm a proud father of 3 millennials, all college graduates, all employed in this county, and all 3 of them thinking about moving elsewhere in America because they can get closer to what they believe is the American dream. That's the workforce you referenced earlier. That's the brain and talent drain this county will suffer if individuals like that want to be here, want to contribute not only in terms of careers, but to the community, giving back, they can't do it because they're going to move somewhere else. There's some of the things that we should be thinking about, that we're doing, either from a policy standpoint, from a private sector standpoint, to really impact the supportable housing issue.
Sure. So just to ask the question I ask every year, How many of your children can afford to live in the community they grew up in? To buy, we have one in the back. That's good. Maybe there's a trend, because I think that's the first hand we've seen in years. So everybody knows this is not complicated. This is very basic math. And so as we think about solutions, the solutions are also not overly complicated. So 4 quick suggestions just to think about. Number 1 is that we have to change the narrative. So over the years, the narrative has evolved that housing costs. We build more housing, it's going to demand more services. There's never been an instant of a house demanding a service. And just to kind of steal one of Lucy Dunn's quote, there's also never been an instance of a house having a baby. People have babies. People demand services. And at the end of the day, that's something that we just have to understand. And actually, I would argue that not housing costs more than housing. Because people living in overcrowded circumstances demand more services, people living in that are adequately housed. And the narrative in so many communities is, we don't want those people living in our community. Not here. There are cities that have been willing to stand with us and argue for the need for subsidized affordable housing, which is considered the hardest. But I'm arguing that the narrative for all types of housing needs to be changed, where housing is viewed as a positive, and how we articulate and build support for that is something we need to pay a lot of attention to. Second suggestion is, how many of you think Washington, D.C. is going to solve our problem? Oh, come on. When Donald Trump becomes president, he'll fix it for all of us. How many of you think Sacramento is going to solve our problems? I mean, the bottom line is we own our own destiny. We have the opportunity to control it. And agency by agency, city by city, if we begin to evaluate and think about the costs that are added to the production of housing and the time that's added to the production of housing, we can start cutting those to the point of being statistically significant. And as I've said numerous times, why are we 2 times overbuilt for retail and we have a shortage for housing? Because cities are incented to do retail, disincented to do housing. We have to get beyond that and think about our communities holistically as we go forward. Third recommendation, non-traditional partners. My wife who's here today is a doctor of nursing, and so health is something we talk about a lot. But healthcare, hi Victoria, thank you for being here. Healthcare is a natural partner, and the best example is the Public Health Department in LA County created a housing authority inside the Public Health Department with the goal of creating 10,000 housing units for the most chronically homeless in LA County. Their net savings, if you take the cost of housing versus the cost of medical care, $34,000 per person. 34,000 times 10,000 is a big number, whatever it is. And at the end of the day, 77% reduction in emergency room usage, 84% reduction in recidivism. Public health, housing, education need to be aligned, because how well educated are those 29,000 kids that are living 2 and 3 families? How much can they do homework? And so non-traditional partners, we've got to get them into the equation. And then the last suggestion, and this is a challenge for Orange County, so I'm going to throw it out there. My perception is Orange County has a bunch of really smart people. Am I right? Just checking. And some very creative businesses. I mean, you have, buildings full of what are they called? Imaginarians? Disney Imagineers. That's right. I mean, we have to get the business community, the creative talent in Orange County thinking about alternative solutions. Because if what we've been doing for the last 50 years hasn't been working, to continue doing it is what? Exactly. Thank you very much.
Very nice.
Definitely, it's strengthening through non-traditional partners in the communities that need it most. And there is a chart that is in the book that will show you where those communities are. So what about a business adopting a K through 12, where, by the way, 50% of those children are Latinos, in all K-12 in Orange County? What about working with colleges of education to ensure that they have the resources? I saw a wonderful presentation by my College of Education at a national conference. I had no idea. And here they are, they got somebody to give dollars to bring in iPads for children in the 2nd and 3rd grade. Their attendance rate was down through the floor. At the end of that project, attendance for those children was 99%. Students were engaged in their learning. They had the resources. When you look at the haves and have-nots, look at what's in those schools and how can we support them to have those resources. Join projects like Gear Up, which is federal, gives us dollars, that really talks about how do you bring together K-12, the community college, the senior college, and really adopt a cohort from the very beginning and help them get through it and be part of that conversation, be part of that Gear Up project, and so many more that are out there. Also go back into the communities. We always are away, not in my neighborhood, but what about going into the neighborhood? What about educating the parents in their language? So that's another really strong way of doing that. Another thing I would say is advocate for public education and public higher education. People think that because I'm Cal State Fullerton, the state supports us completely. I get 40% of my operating budget from the state. We had, in the fall, over 70,000 students who tried to get into Cal State Fullerton. 20,000 eligible students were denied access because we don't have the resources to ensure that these individuals who did everything we asked them to do to get into our institution, they cannot. Now some will say, well, they can go somewhere else. And what happens if you're place-bound? What happens if you're taking care of that older parent? What happens if you're taking care of your own children? They can't leave the neighborhood. And so where do they go? So advocating for public higher education and public education is extremely important. And finally, I would say support causes that you're passionate about. I have wonderful philanthropic individuals who come in and are passionate about maybe the College of Business, College of Education, Health, Human Development, more nursing, and they support. Of course, we're going to be accountable, and we're going to show you how successful we are. I mean, we've raised graduation rates in 3 years, from 51% when I first got there in 6 years to 61% in 3 years. That's a 19% improvement. And it is because we're passionate and we're committed and we believe that every child or student that walks in through that door can get that education. And we make sure that we hire people that are as passionate as this first generation kid is as well.
Thank you very much. I mentioned in my opening remarks about the cost of living here in Orange County, 46% higher than the national average. It cuts across all three of these disciplines, if you will, including housing. Not making enough money, can't afford to live here. Very sensitive and certainly well-debated topic, minimum wage. Is that something that this county must sort of turn and face? There isn't a single city, Los Angeles and several other cities in California have been addressing this and passing increases in minimum wage. Any thoughts from you, Steve, about minimum wage and where it should go and what this county really needs to do in thinking about that topic?
Sure. So here's the challenge. I'm a free market guy. The challenge we have is we have heavily distorted the market. And once you distort the market in one direction, then you have to understand how to try and compensate for that. And so the way we've distorted the market in housing is by adding all of the costs, anything imaginable to the cost of housing. And there are people that have an agenda where their goal is to reduce the production of housing. I mean, their ideal scenario would be, half the population of California leaves, and then California would be a good place. The question is, look to your left, look to your right, who's leaving? And so the challenge we have is because the market has already been distorted, we then need to be very thoughtful about how do we not further distort the market, and how do we compensate for the distortion that exists. And so another example is rent control. I've been in 3 meetings around the state of California in the last week where rent control is the #1 idea for solving the affordability of housing. And I would argue it would have the exact opposite effect, because anything that we do that slows the production of housing is not a good thing. And so with minimum wage, I mean, I'm not versed in the argument of minimum wage. You know, the challenge you have is if you look at the chart on page 24, you know, just this, what it takes to actually rent a place is minimum wage does not allow you to be able to pay minimum rents because minimum rents are so high because of the distortion in the cost and the production of multifamily housing. And so at the end of the day, whether or not it's increasing the minimum wage or lowering the cost of housing, somehow we have to get alignment so that people that are earning a wage can afford to be adequately housed. So how's that for beating around that question?
Christina?
Well, I think, you know, if you look at the economic indicators that are in here, the areas for growth, and I'll take a, following up on Steve's comments, if you look at page 9, right, jobs are growing for those with higher education. That's where our economic growth is coming from. So I think the solution, the long-term solution is really, and I guess I'm stealing a page out of Millie's, is really around education and making those children best prepared to succeed in life. Right now, the Stanford Institute on Policy just came out with a report on poverty in this state and all the unique poverty. Why is poverty so unique in California? And one of the things that they talked about is that 50% of those students that graduate from high school are likely to be in poverty for the rest of their lives. You don't graduate from high school. What is one of the biggest risk factors of not graduating from high school? 9th grade algebra. It can't be that if you do not pass 9th grade algebra, you are doomed to a life of poverty for the rest of your life. So we've got to figure out how we can make sure that students are best prepared. And from my perspective, if they're prepared going into kindergarten, and they are reading at grade level at grade 3, and they are doing 7th grade math, they are most likely to pass 9th grade algebra. And if we can get them through 9th grade algebra, they're most likely to pass high school and graduate.
So let me also add what Christina was talking about. 80% of our alums stay within Southern California. And so they're in our neighborhoods. So if we educate students to go into these fields that we just pointed out, especially in areas of STEM, but in every other field, because we need people everywhere, then people will be able to go into housing. But if they can't get these positions, then you go back to what the report talks about, where you have many families living in one small apartment that's not conducive for healthy lifestyles, that's not conducive for studying and education, et cetera. So I go back to, if we're pro all of these things, we must be pro education.
Terrific, Millie, thank you. You have the last word. I want to remind you, October 15th, the 25th anniversary Orange County Forum. Former Governor Pete Wilson will be here. Ladies and gentlemen, let's please thank our 3 panelists.
The Orange County Forum is brought to you through the generous support of the Orange County Register and our sustaining partners. For more information about the Orange County Forum, call 949-588-9884. The Orange County Forum is a nonprofit organization. Your contributions are tax deductible.